I get unfairly credited with having planned to spend my life studying this city. It was a one-time survey back in 1982. Houston was booming. 1 million people had moved into Harris County, Texas between 1970 and 1982, coming at the rate of 1,380 people a week, 230 cars and trucks every day on average being added to the streets and freeways of Harris County. Greatest boom anyone had ever seen, brought about by the tenfold increase in the value of oil. This was a one-company town. 82% of all the primary sector jobs in Houston in 1980 were tied into the oil business. And the price of a barrel of oil that was selling for $3.20 in 1970 went to $10 and $15 with the Arab oil embargo, to $20 and $25 with the Iranian Revolution in 78, 79, to $32.50 by 1980. Houston's prime industrial products had increased tenfold in value with no lessening of world demand. This was boomtown America. So we did a one-time survey. We said, let's get the students involved in measuring how people are dealing with this tremendous growth, but also growing concerns about the social costs of growth, traffic and pollution and crime. One-time survey. Never occurred to us to do it again. 2 months later, the oil boom collapsed, and 100,000 jobs were lost by the end of 1983. And we said, my God, we better do this survey again. And for 30 years, my students and I have been taking a representative random sample of Harris County adults reached by random telephone numbers, asking people with identical questions over the years, how do you see the world? What is happening in your life? And we have sat back and watched the world change. This is a fundamentally different economic world than the world that Houston and Texas grew up in and reached their success in. The source of wealth from now on will have less and less to do with natural resources, which was the basis for the wealth of Houston and Texas, and more to do with human resources. You didn't need education to make money in Texas. You made money by land, commodities, buying and selling land and exploiting all the things you could do on the land: cotton, timber, cattle, oil. The source of wealth in the 21st century will have less and less to do with natural resources and more to do with knowledge, with human resources, with skills. The blue-collar path to economic security has disappeared. Gone forever is the opportunity for a young man and woman to graduate from American high school with a high school diploma, come out into the Houston American workforce, put me to work America, and expect to be able to make a middle-class wage. If you are doing a job that I can train a third world worker to do, and I pay that third world worker $10 a day to do that job, I'm not going to pay you $10 an hour. And we are watching across America, and particularly clearly in Houston, a growing gap between rich and poor, predicated above all else on access to quality higher education. What you earn depends on what you have learned in a way that has never been as true as it is today. During that quarter century after World War II, the average American man doubled his income between 1950 and 1970. The rising tide lifted all boats. The poorest 20% of Americans more than doubled their incomes between 1946 and 1978. The richest 5% virtually doubled theirs. Virtually all the benefits of economic growth the last quarter century have gone to the richest 20%, most of that to the richest 5%, most of that to the richest 1%, in a striking redistribution of earnings out of the hands of the poor and the middle class into the hands of the rich and the super rich in a way that we have not seen before in America, with the possible exception of 1928. In 2007, the last year for which we have full records, the richest 1% of Americans took home 23.5% of all the money earned by all Americans. The central political challenge of our time is how to restore the equalizing institutions that used to ensure that all Americans could share in the prosperity of the country. And education has become a critical determinant. The only way to improve the lot of the poor is not by accelerating economic growth or by cutting taxes on the rich. None of that helps the poor. The only way to improve the lot of the poor is to invest in their skills. education has become the critical determinant of a person's ability to earn enough money to support a family in the knowledge economy of the 21st century. The other aspect of this new economy is especially interesting, I think, for Houston. Houston's location in the East Texas oil fields that counted for everything in the 20th century is going to count for less and less, and eventually for zilch in the 21st century. What will be the source of Houston's wealth? The answer has something to do with biotech. The largest medical complex in the world, the Texas Medical Center, 100,000 people are working there, 28,000 doctors, major research opportunities. And then nanotechnology at Rice University and superconductivity at the University of Houston, bio-nanotech, bio-nano-infotech, bio-nano-info-envirotech. The source of wealth for Houston in the 21st century will have to do with attracting the best and the brightest people in America, working at the cutting edge of knowledge, able to put that knowledge into commercial ventures. The resource of the knowledge economy is housed between the ears of the best and the brightest people in America who can live anywhere. In 2001, the Greater Houston Partnership, the business elite of Houston, got together with groups that it had nothing to do with in the past. Trees for Houston, the Park People, Scenic Houston, to form something called the Quality of Life Coalition. Let us work together, harness public and private monies to plant 1 million trees in the city during the next 20 years. Let's tear down the billboards and landscape the freeway so those 2 major roads that you take from the airport into Houston are not among the ugliest roads in America, but instead green parkways leading you into a green city. Let's take those bayous that were concretized in the cheapest possible way by the Army Corps of Engineers to serve as drainage ditches for our flooding problems and restore them into becoming linear parks. There's a major initiative underway called the Bayou Greenway Initiative that plans to raise the monies to build 250 miles of bike lanes and jogging trails and green spaces along all of the 10 major bayous of Houston to form linear parks that will suddenly turn Houston into this extraordinarily green place that it once was. The degree to which Houstonians, Harris County residents living in the most sprawling, least dense major city in America, the most automobile-dependent city in America, when you ask people if you could live in any kind of housing, what would you prefer? 57% said, I want a single-family house with a big yard, even if I have to drive most of the places I need to go. But 41% of all Harris County residents in this sprawling metropolis of ours said, I would prefer to live in a more urbanized home within walking distance of shops and workplaces. So it's a city in the process of reinventing itself for the 21st century. People in our surveys complain, because we invite them to, about traffic and pollution and crime and the weather. Then we ask, well, how would you rate the Houston area as a place to live? It's a wonderful place to live. Overwhelmingly and increasingly, 90% say it's a better place than anywhere else. The great strength of Houston is the people who live here, love it here, are surprised by all the amenities that are here. Our problem is that people who don't live in Houston say, yuck, why would you want to live in Houston? And the central challenge for Houston, as it positions itself for prosperity, is to change that perception. And quality of life issues have now become central to the pro-growth agenda for Houston in the 21st century. Boy, if that's all that was happening in Houston, that would be plenty to keep sociologists like me fascinated as we watch this 19th century business-oriented city gradually, reluctantly, but unmistakably coming to grips with the challenges of the 21st century. But at this very same moment has come this fundamental, irreversible transformation in the ethnic composition of the Houston, the Texas, and the American population. Quick sense of why here, why now, what's the historical background for this? Well, between 1492 and 1965, 82% of all the human beings on the face of this earth who came to these shores came from Europe. Another 12% were African Americans originally brought here as slaves to serve the Europeans. There was a handful of Chinese and Japanese working as farmers and laborers in California and Hawaii. This nation was an amalgam of European nationalities, deliberately so. It was operating the last 40 years of that period, between 1924 and 1965, under one of the most viciously racist laws the U.S. Congress ever passed, the National Origins Quota Act. In 1924, Congress enacted this incredible law that said, all right, from now on, you can come to this country in direct proportion to which your ethnicity and nationality was represented in the census of 1890, to give major preference to Northern Europeans. It was a law of the land through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Could not survive the shifts of consciousness with the civil rights movements, Kennedy's assassination, and in 1965, Congress changed the law. It says, well, we used to be a racist nation. We're not racist anymore. We're going to give every country recognized by the UN 20,000 visas a year, regardless of their ethnicity or nationality, so get off my back. We're not racist. But we'll continue the hallmark of American immigration policy, which is family reunification. Then it added another provision. It said, well, if you're a professional of exceptional ability, or if you have skills that are demonstrably needed in a short supply, you too can come to the head of the line. And Congress, in its debates, is saying we need to open the door for some more British doctors, some more German engineers. It never occurred to anyone that there were going to be African doctors, Indian engineers, Chinese computer programmers who would be able for the first time in the 20th century to come to America. The world changed. During the 1960s, suddenly 3.5 million immigrants came to this country. Only 38% were from Europe. In the 1970s, 5 million came. Only 18% were Europeans. 1980s, 10 million immigrants came. In the 1990s and the 2000s, 11.5 million new immigrants came to this country, 88% coming from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. And the United States, that throughout all of its history had been an amalgam of European nationalities, is becoming a microcosm of the world. The first nation in history that can say, we are a free people and we come from everywhere. Two cities, Los Angeles and New York, contain between them 1/3 of all the foreign-born residents of this country. The two great immigration capitals, Los Angeles and New York, followed by lesser gateway magnet cities, Miami, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston. Followed right after Houston by San Diego, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Boston, Atlanta, now spreading to every city and town across America. No city has been transformed as fully, as completely, as suddenly, as irreversibly as Houston, Texas. It's fair to say that this city, throughout all of our history, was basically a biracial southern city dominated and controlled in an automatic, taken-for-granted way by white men. And in the space of the last 30 years has become one of the most ethnically and culturally diverse cities in the country. During the 1960s and 70s, with the oil boom, it was Anglos pouring into Houston because this is where the jobs were. And by 1980, Houston had become the 4th largest city in America, still an overwhelmingly Anglo city. The Anglo population in 1970 to 1980 grew by 28%. Then came the oil bust. Between 1980 and 1990, the Anglo population grew by 1%. Between 1990 and 2000, the Anglo population actually dropped by 6.3%, and it dropped again by 5.2% between 2000 and 2010. Meanwhile, while the Anglo population was dropping in 1990 to 2000 by 6.3%, the African-American population grew by 20%. The Hispanic population grew by 74%. The Asian population by 76%. By the year 2000, there were 3.4 million people living in Harris County, Texas, all of us minorities. And by 2010, Harris County is now 41% Latino and only 33% Anglo. That's a tremendous change in a very short amount of time. Not surprising that not everybody's entirely happy about this. I tell people, got to be gentle with Anglos. This is a very big change in a very short amount. No one consulted with me before all these people came. And there is a remarkable, fundamental transformation. There are two revolutions occurring before our eyes in this country. They go by the names, of course, of the aging and the colorizing of America, also known as the graying and the browning. We are living longer, healthier lives than human beings have ever lived in the history of human life on this planet. Doctors would tell you that age 65 in 1965 is the equivalent of age 73 today. You reach 65 in good health, you have a quarter of your life ahead of you. We chose 65 as the time when you were old and were supposed to retire back in 1906, when 7% of Americans lived to the age of 65. For our purposes, what's critical to realize is that it is Anglos who are overwhelmingly disproportionately overrepresented among the senior folk in America today, because they were the ones who've been born here in the 20s and 30s and early 40s and to be now into senior status, and we have not seen anything yet. The baby boom. 76 million babies born in this country during that incredible period after World War II between 1946 and 1964, preceded and followed by baby bust generations. So it's been a bulge in the system for the last 60 years. Demographers talk about it like a pig being swallowed by a python, moving along, not very healthy either for the pig or the python. The leading edge of those 76 million babies turns 65 this year. And we are going to watch a literal doubling in the number of Americans over the age of 65 in the next 25 years. And those are overwhelmingly Anglo babies. So the young people across America are disproportionately non-Anglo, as the older folks are disproportionately Anglo. Nowhere is that clearer than in Houston, Texas. Because Houston is a city of migrants. We were a city of Anglo migrants during the oil boom, and for the last 30 years, with the collapse of the oil boom in 1982, we have been a city of non-Anglo migrants. We are at this remarkable hinge in history. We reach a random sample of Harris County residents aged 18 to 95. Of all those we reach who are 65 years old or older, 70% are Anglos. And of everybody under the age of 30, 78% are non-Anglos. And you go a little further to the children. In HISD classrooms, of the 203,000 kids enrolled in classrooms from kindergarten to senior year in high school, 62% are Latino kids and 27% are African American. 89% of the children of Houston are African American and Latino, the two groups overwhelmingly the most likely to be living in poverty. 80% of all those 203,000 kids qualify for reduced cost or free lunch programs. We know what poverty does to your ability to succeed in the public schools. And it is a safe statement to make that if Houston's African-American and Latino young people are unprepared to succeed in the knowledge economy of the 21st century, it is hard to envision a prosperous future for Houston. That is who we are and will be as the 21st century unfolds. And I tell people, this is a done deal. Close the borders tomorrow. Not another immigrant comes to these shores ever again. 60-year-old Anglos are not going to be making a whole lot more babies. I tell people, we'll do the best we can. We'll work on it every chance we get. You can go to the bank on this. Every business in Houston is going to figure out how to capitalize on the burgeoning diversity of the city or find it harder to grow their business as the 21st century unfolds. This ethnic transformation could be the greatest asset that Houston could have as it positions itself in the global economy. We have the second largest port in the country, and that port locks us into being a world center for trade and commerce in the global economy. Tremendous advantage for the city to have in positions of economic and political power Black Houstonians, Hispanic Houstonians, Asian Houstonians to build the bridges to the global marketplace. This new immigration into American society today is unprecedented in American history in two fundamental respects. Number one, of course, it is non-European. But even more so, number two, it is remarkably bifurcated. One group of immigrants are coming with higher levels of education and income backgrounds than we have ever seen in the history of immigration. Asians and Africans are coming here with remarkable credentials. 61% of all Asian immigrants in Houston have college degrees, compared to just 47% of US-born Anglos. And one group of immigrants, largely Latino, are coming with striking educational deficits. Almost 50% of all Latino immigrants do not have high school degrees. This ethnic transformation could be the greatest asset that Houston could have, or it could tear us apart and become a major liability, reducing rather than enhancing our competitiveness in the global economy, setting the stage for a massive increase in an underclass of urban citizens of Houston who are cut off from the opportunity to earn enough money to support a family because the educational credentials that are so critical in this new economy have not been there. The question of what kind of future will we build is the central question that this generation needs to deal with as we think about how to build a Houston that will succeed in the 21st century. This is where the American future is going to be worked out. Let me end this then with two sources of wisdom from ancient China. One is that famous Chinese curse, right? In the old days in China, when you were angry at somebody, you'd say, "Darn you, may you live in interesting times," meant as a curse. I don't think there have ever been more interesting times than right here and right now. And then there's that wonderfully insightful way that the Chinese language renders the word for crisis. The word for crisis in Chinese is wei ji, consists of two characters, one signifying danger and the other opportunity. Not a bad way to think about this remarkable coming together of forces, a set of cards that this generation has been dealt. No one planned for the oil boom to collapse, for Houston to go into a major recession, and then recover into a radically different economy where education has become so absolutely critical, where quality of life issues are now central to the pro-growth agenda for this city if it hopes to succeed and to be prosperous in the 21st century. No one planned that. And no one planned, as we know, for that ethnic transformation to take place. Here we are. These are the cards that this generation has been dealt. How we play those cards, with what kind of wisdom, sensitivity, determination to seize the opportunities and derail the dangers, will be the measure of the kind of city, the kind of state, the kind of country that we build together in the 21st century.